Your Honor, the truth has been buried for too long. Gwen Brown's voice trembled in the courtroom as all eyes were on her. The room went cold. The judge leaned forward. Lawyers ceased flipping their papers, and even the sound of the reporters' cameras clicking appeared to hang suspended midair. It was one of those moments where the world itself caught its breath. Since the moment Gwen appeared at the witness stand, the room was filled with tension, like a clenched fist. This was not the shy girl viewers remembered in the background of Sister Wives. This was a woman at the threshold of truth and deception, prepared to tackle the empire her father created. The gallery was filled wall to wall. Producers from large TV networks, gossip columnists, bloggers, and curious citizens had occupied all seating, anticipating drama. Ex-family friends sat towards the back, whispering anxiously. Some even held notebooks, eager to jot down every word for posterity. In the front row of her family were the very individuals she was now going to betray. Christine, her mother, had her eyes cast down, holding a tissue between her fingers. She appeared proud, yet afraid of what her daughter was about to let out. Beside her sat Janelle, jaw set in intense silence. Meri sat lightly back, arms crossed, as if preparing for collision. And then, directly across from Gwen, sat Kody and Robin. Kody's face was stiff, his lips pressed into a thin, angry line. His eyes burned holes through Gwen, as though sheer willpower could silence her. Robin sat beside him, whispering frantically, her perfectly painted nails drumming against the table. If anyone looked closely, they would have seen her hand trembling. The silence was so thick, even the scratching of the court clerk's pen echoed deafeningly. Gwen swallowed hard. Her hands quivered a little, as she held tight to the wooden rails of the witness stand. But her voice rang out with surprising force. "This isn't simple for me," she started, looking at the judge, then the jury. "For years I said nothing. I watched things go down behind closed doors. I heard things that no child should ever hear. I saw decisions that destroyed my family, and I told myself it wasn't my place to speak." Her voice broke, but only momentarily. She stiffened her shoulders. "But today I will not be silent, because this trial is not about money. It's not even about failed promises. This is about survival. This is about telling the truth at last." Gasps ran through the courtroom. A person in the gallery whispered, "Oh my God," before being quieted by the bailiff. Kody turned to his lawyer, speaking in a sharp whisper, his face red with anger. The lawyer made a note on a yellow pad. But Gwen didn't pay attention. For the very first time in her life, she was in control of the conversation, and she wasn't going to relinquish it. She raised a small pile of papers, her hands stable now. "These are records," she declared steadily, "that show where the family fortune actually went. For years we were led to believe that everything was equal, that every wife and every child was cared for. That was the deception we were all sold. But the reality reveals that while some of us fought to keep up with bills, while some of us were left behind, others were comfortably living off what was stolen from us." The courtroom was filled with whispers. The judge's gavel came down. "Order, I will have order in this court." Christine finally raised her head, tears shining in her eyes. Janelle exhaled softly, almost a sigh of relief. Meri clamped down on her lip, her expression unchanging. And Kody, his scowl grew darker. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed like a king whose throne had been questioned. But Gwen wasn't done. She met her father's eyes. Her voice steadied, strengthened. "Dad, you always said that family first, that loyalty is the most important thing. But what if loyalty turns into chains? What if the ones you trusted the most are the ones that are stealing from you? What if the family name is a jail?" Robin's expression contorted, and she hissed something ugly to Kody. The cameras recorded it. The reporters wrote it down. And the crowd leaned in further. "Your Honor," Gwen went on, facing the bench, "I know what I'm about to tell you is going to surprise people. Some will accuse me of lying. Some will accuse me of being a vengeful daughter, with an axe to grind. But I have evidence. I have the truth. And I'm willing to share it all." The judge regarded her intently, his expression neutral. Miss Brown, are you ready to introduce your evidence into this court? Yes, Your Honor, Gwen said resolutely. Her voice was no longer shaking. The second those words were out of her mouth, the whole room changed. This was no longer family soap opera. This was war. The bailiff inched forward towards the stand, his face stern. The clerk poised herself to record new exhibits. The jury leaned forward, eyes wide as if observing the opening act in a thriller. Even the air itself crackled with tension. Kody pounded his hand on the table, earning a stern glance from the judge. This is outrageous, he growled. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's my daughter, my own daughter, and she's trying to ruin me. But Gwen didn't bat an eye. She didn't even blink. For the first time ever, she gazed at her father and didn't see the man who had towered over her and controlled her with his tongue. She saw a man trapped by his own deceptions, frantically trying not to let his empire fall. The tension in the room became unbearable. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras clicked wildly, and the sound of frantic typing echoed as bloggers rushed to post live updates. And then Gwen spoke again, this time with a calm that cut through the chaos like a blade. This isn't about destroying you, Dad. This is about setting myself free. This is about setting all of us free. The words hung in the air, unshakable and heavy. The judge sat back, putting on his glasses. The jury looked at each other in shock. Christine sobbed quietly, unable to contain herself any longer. Janelle put a comforting hand on her arm. Meri stared at Gwen, her face softening for the first time in years. But Kody sat rigid, his jaw clenched, his fist grasping the edge of the table as if the ground beneath him were about to give way. Continue, Miss Brown, the judge finally ordered. And so began the trial. The doors to the courtroom had hardly closed before the drama started. On one side of the room, Gwen stood upright at the witness stand, her fingers gripping the wooden edge like she was held to sanity. She was no longer just a daughter. She was a whistleblower, a truth bringer, a woman who dared to confront the people who had raised her. On the other side was Kody Brown and Robin, together their attorneys standing guard beside them like soldiers guarding royalty. Kody's jaw was set, his chest out in challenge. He stood like a man preparing to fight, but his eyes betrayed him. Fear was burning in the depths. Robin hovered close to him, whispering all the time, her face white under the glare of the courtroom lights. She'd occasionally look at Gwen, her eyes wide, as if pleading silently with her to desist. Behind them, Christine sat with her hands clasped neatly in her lap. She was torn in two, half mother, half witness to devastation. Tears sparkled in her eyes, but her lips were pressed into silence. Janelle sat beside her, her back straight, her face grim with quiet fury. Meri, though, sat slightly apart, her arms folded, her face impassive, her allegiance to anyone unfirm. The air in the room was thick. Reporters crowded every inch, pens racing across notepads, cameras clicking at every intake of breath or lifted eyebrow. Even the air felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were strained to their limits by the burden of secrets. The judge pushed forward. His voice was steady but authoritative. Miss Brown, you have made some very serious claims. Can you produce evidence of financial deceit within your family? For an instant, time was suspended. The question lingered in the air, and all of them inclined forward to listen to Gwen's answer. She swallowed, then asserted, "Yes, Your Honor, I do." The words were akin to a thunderclap. Gasps ran through the courtroom. One man at the back whispered, "She's actually going through with it," before being hushed by the bailiff. Gwen picked up a manila folder from the table next to her and held it aloft. "These records," she stated definitively, "reveal the reality of what happened to the family finances. For years we heard that resources were being distributed evenly, that every wife, every child was receiving equitable assistance. That was not accurate. These files confirm that at the same time some of us were struggling to pay rent or purchase groceries. Others were living comfortably, their accounts paid for without hesitation." She slammed the folder shut with a resolute crash, the sound ringing through the quiet room. Kody's face reddened. He leaned close to his attorney, His words a stern whisper that was loud enough for reporters standing close by to catch. This is a betrayal. She's my daughter. And she's stabbing me in the back. But Gwen refused to retreat. She gazed straight at her father, her eyes unwavering. This isn't betrayal, Dad. This is truth. And truth doesn't go away just because you ignore it. The lawyer for Gwen's side stood. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to enter these documents into evidence. The judge gave a curt nod. Proceed. The bailiff retrieved the folder, handing it over to the clerk. The quiet rustle of papers filled the room, but it seemed like thunder to those observing. The jury members edged forward, staring as pages of bank statements, receipts and transfers were shown on a large screen for all to view. Line by line, the figures spoke a tale no one wished to hear. Thousands of dollars deposited into hidden accounts. Payments for expensive vacations as other members of the family pinched pennies. Checks drawn in false names. This is appalling, Kody abruptly bellowed, banging his hand down on the table. The crash resonated throughout the room, jolting even Robin. These are falsehoods. Distorted half-truths. She has no idea about the burdens I bear. The judge's gavel came down with a loud crack. Mr. Brown, please calm yourself, or I will find you in contempt. The courtroom fell silent once more. Kody slumped back into his seat, his face flushed, his breathing labored. But the harm was done. The outburst made him look even more desperate. Robin leaned against him, whispering hysterically. Her eyes sparkled with tears as she attempted to calm him, but her hands trembled when she placed them on his arm. Meanwhile, Gwen pressed on, her voice steady, unwavering. I know what I saw. I know what I lived. And I have proof. While some of us begged for support, while Mom worried about paying the bills, money was being siphoned away into secret accounts. And you told us it was for the good of the family. But it wasn't. It was for you. Christine's tears spilled over. She pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing her eyes quietly. Janelle's lips tightened, her jaw trembling with anger, while Meri finally uncrossed her arms, her eyes darting nervously between Gwen and Kody. The room felt like it was cracking in two. The foundation of a once united family, splintering before everyone's eyes. The judge cleared his throat, his voice deep with authority. The evidence will be weighed, but the charges are serious, and this court will consider them as such. As the papers were handed down, the jury wrote notes wildly. Their eyes were stern, their brows furrowed. It was plain they weren't writing Gwen off as a scorned daughter. They were listening, believing. Kody sat stiff in his chair, his fists still gripping the table. He resembled a man standing by as his empire went up in flames, helpless to put it out. Robin moved closer, whispering frantically, but even she couldn't hide the fear on her face. And Gwen? She stood taller than ever before. For the first time she wasn't the child pleading to be listened to. She was the voice ringing the walls of a courtroom, screaming truth. The judge's gavel fell for the second time. This court will now recess. We will reconvene in 30 minutes to continue proceedings. The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters rushed to the doors. Journalists shouted into their recorders. Cameras flashed like lightning. Christine leaned over to Gwen, clutching her hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Janelle nodded in agreement, her eyes blazing with determination. But on the other side of the room, Kody jumped up suddenly, his chair thudding harshly against the floor. He shook a finger at Gwen. You'll be sorry, he spat, his words thick with hate. You think you know so much, but you don't. You're ruining your own family. The bailiff moved in quickly. Mr. Brown, that's enough. But Gwen only looked at him with calm defiance. The family was already destroyed, she replied softly, but loud enough for the microphones to catch. I'm just telling the truth. The gallery gasped. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Cameras flashed brighter than ever. As Gwen walked away from her father, she felt the weight lift from her chest. For the first time in years, she was free. Not because the battle was won, but because she had finally decided to fight. The war for the Brown family's truth had finally begun. Recess ended. But the energy in the courtroom hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had intensified. Hot and heavy. Volatile. Reporters scurried back to their places, their phones ringing with updates from the headlines they'd already trumpeted around the web. Gwen Brown sues father for fraud. Family dynasty in disarray. Sister wives' secrets revealed in courtroom melodrama. The gallery hummed like a beehive. But the instant the judge resumed, and the gavel struck down, silence swooped over the room once more. All rise. The bailiff bellowed. Everyone rose as the judge sat down, his face set in stone. As the command to rise came, the benches creaked beneath the scuffle. Court is back in session. The judge stated sternly. Miss Brown, you may proceed with your testimony. Gwen stood slowly, folder grasped in her fists as a weapon. She seemed smaller next to the giant walls of the courtroom, but her fierce glare made her appear bigger than life. Thank you, Your Honor. She strode back to the podium, heels clicking against the shiny floor. The walk sounded like a drum roll. She fiddled with the microphone and looked about the room. For the first time, she wasn't nervous. She was ready. Your Honor, I'd like to present more than numbers today. I'd like to present the voices of this family, the words that were never meant to leave our living rooms, the conversations that prove the truth. The gallery stirred. Even the jury leaned forward. Evidence was one thing, but secret recordings, that was something else. The lawyer on Gwen's side nodded. Permission to present audio evidence. Your Honor. The judge nodded calmly. Granted. Proceed. The courtroom lights dipped as a projector illuminated. Gwen dropped a USB drive on the table, and in seconds the speakers crackled. Then Kody's voice rang through the room. The family money is where I say it is. Don't even ask me about this. What I choose to do with it isn't your business. Gasps ripped through the room. Christine's face contorted as the sound reached her ears. Janelle closed her eyes, shaking her head in mute anger. Meri winced, her eyes flying over to Kody. Kody himself blanched, then flushed, his face bracing like a balloon about to burst. He pounded his palm on the table once again. That's out of context. He bellowed. She's twisting this. That was private family business. Order, growled the judge, slamming the gavel. Another outburst, Mr. Brown, and I will hold you in contempt. The jury's expressions were stern. They weren't looking at a leader anymore. They were looking at a man who sounded arrogant, condescending, and manipulative. Gwen didn't blink. That wasn't the only tape, she replied evenly. Her attorney cued the next segment. Robin's voice echoed. It's not fair, but it's what Kody wants. We'll be fine. We always are. Let the others figure it out. Christine buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Janelle's fists clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. The gallery broke into whispers, the sound like waves crashing. The judge's gavel thundered again. Silence in this courtroom. Gwen faced the jury square on now. We were taught for years that loyalty was silence, that family harmony was the pretense of nothing wrong. But in the privacy of our own homes, there were favorites, secrets, and lies. The evidence isn't just merely numbers. It's intent. It's betrayal. Her words sliced through the air like a knife. Her attorney presented additional documents. Records for high-end purchases, hotel reservations in distant cities, high-priced gifts that none of the other wives or kids had ever laid eyes on. Side by side, the trail of paper created a picture so clear that even the most doubtful juror couldn't deny it. This money, Gwen said, gesturing to one document on the screen, was for school fees. It was spent instead on a private vacation. This, she turned another page, was for groceries bypassed into a personal account. Again and again and again, we see the same thing. The air became more tense with each word. The gallery was leaning so far forward it seemed the benches would collapse. Kody's attorney finally got up, pounding his fists on the table. This is nothing but the tantrums of a spoiled child, he boomed. She's manipulating receipts and picking and choosing quotes. This family has given up everything to make it in the public eye. and she has the nerve to drag them through the mud for sympathy. But Gwen was prepared. She faced the lawyer, chin held high. If I had wanted attention, I could have remained quiet and played the victim. But I'm not playing. I'm here to demonstrate the truth. She faced the judge. Your Honor, I loved my family. I still love them. But love cannot erase betrayal. And silence cannot erase fraud. Christine cried then. She wept out loud. Her tissue clutched in her shaking hands. Janelle put an arm around her shoulders. Even Meri, stiffly seated until this moment, blinked wildly, her lips quivering. The judge ordered a brief recess, giving Christine a chance to calm down. The courtroom hummed with rumor. Reporters writing as fast as they could, their pens struggling to keep pace with the tempest breaking before them. Once silence was restored, Gwen's attorney talked in a hushed tone. Miss Brown, why did you decide to come forward now? Gwen took a breath, her words even but charged with emotion. Because I can't let it continue. I can't keep standing by and watching the people I care about get hurt while others benefit from lies. I'm not here to destroy my family. I'm here because it already is broken. I'm just proving why. Her words struck with the force of a hammer blow. Even the judge slightly leaned away, his scowling face relaxing for a split second. The jury stared at her, never looking away. Some jotted down notes. Others just gazed. But every last one of them was fixed on Gwen. And then the day's coup de grace. Her attorney produced one final document. Miss Brown, do you know this signature? Gwen nodded. Yes, that's my father's. The attorney flipped the document toward the jury. This is a notarized authorization for a transfer of $50,000 from the trust account of the family to a private account held by only Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robin Brown. The jury collectively gasped. The gallery burst into pandemonium. The judge banged his gavel. Order, order. But no amount of pounding could remove the harm that had been done. Kody stood, his own face contorted in anger. This is defamation, he bellowed. You're ruining your own family, Gwen. Do you even know what you're doing? Gwen looked at him. Her voice was cool, near uncanny in its calmness. Yes, Dad. For the very first time in my life, I know precisely what I'm doing. The room fell silent. The judge at last brought the session to a close for the day. But no one stirred. The words still lingered in the air, charged, unignorable. As the gavel came down for recess, one thing was certain. The Brown family would never be the same. The following morning, the courthouse resembled the backdrop of a Hollywood premiere instead of a trial. News trucks occupied the street. Reporters pushed microphones into the faces of anyone who had any connection to the Brown family. And gawkers congregated behind barricades in hopes of catching a glimpse of the spectacle. Day 3 of the Brown family trial. One journalist said on TV Live. And already it has produced shocking revelations. Gwen Brown's evidence has torn apart the very carefully constructed image of her family. But can she hold up to the pressure today? As her father's lawyers get ready to battle back with both guns blazing. Inside court, the atmosphere was charged. The gallery quickly filled with strangers, sister wives, fans, even former neighbors who said they knew the Browns. Reporters huddled and whispered among themselves about leaked papers and hidden recordings. Everyone was sure this was the day the case would fall apart or blow up. When the judge appeared and the gavel struck, the room fell silent. Court is now in session, announced the bailiff. Gwen perched on the witness stand, her shoulders back, her face pale but firm. Facing her, Kody resembled a man unhinged. His hair stood on end. His tie was undone. His face an unnerving blend of fury and desperation. Robin sat next to him, her fists together, her lips moving wordlessly as if in prayer. Kody's attorney stood. His voice was booming, assured and incisive. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you heard yesterday wasn't the truth. What you heard was bitterness on the part of a young woman. Her effort to strike out at a father she doesn't know. Miss Gwen Brown is no accountant. She is no investigator. She is just a child distorting family hardship into something sinister. He faced Gwen, his gaze piercing. So let's lift the veil and show us who Gwen truly is. The words hurt, but Gwen didn't wince. The attorney paced. Miss Brown, isn't it a fact that you've had a tense relationship with your father for years? Isn't it a fact that you've disagreed with his religion, his way of life, and his decisions? And isn't it a fact that your testimony is based more on anger than on facts? The jury shifted uncomfortably. The attorney's tone oozed disdain, intended to reduce Gwen to human proportions. Gwen drew a breath, her voice steady. Yes, I've disagreed with my father. Yes, our relationship has been strained. But disagreement doesn't erase facts. Pain doesn't erase evidence. The truth doesn't change just because it hurts. Her words landed strong and clear. The jury leaned in again. Kody's lawyer frowned but pressed harder. Isn't it also true, Miss Brown, that you've criticized your family publicly before? That you've taken to social media to air grievances instead of handling them privately? Doesn't that show you're seeking attention, not justice? Gwen's gaze didn't falter. I've spoken already. Yes, because quiet was killing me. But this, she raised another pile of papers. This isn't about opinions. These are figures. Transfers, payments. And recordings, they don't lie. The lawyer thumped his hand on the podium. And how do we know these papers weren't doctored? How do we know these recordings weren't manipulated? Before Gwen could respond, her lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. That is an assumption of facts, not an evidence. The documents have already been authenticated by independent auditors. And the tapes by experts. The judge nodded. Objection sustained. Move on, counselor. The air in the room became tighter than a noose. Kody leapt up out of his chair, his words thundering. She's lying. His mouth contorted, his hand shaking as he pointed at Gwen. She's my daughter, and she's lying because she wants to hurt me. Don't you see? She's been poisoned by her mother, by outsiders, by everyone who wants to destroy me. The courtroom burst into gasps. Reporters wrote frantically. Cameras fired like firecrackers. The judge's gavel boomed. Mr. Brown, sit down at once, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. But Kody did not sit. His voice shook, pleading now. You don't get it. I gave everything for this family. I sacrificed, I worked, I bore the burdens. And now he pointed at Gwen. She has the nerve to call me a thief? She has the nerve to betray me on live television. His words rang like thunder. But the jury's faces did not harden with sympathy. Instead, they remembered not a victim, but a man disintegrating. Robin clutched his sleeve, her voice barely above a whisper. At last Kody fell back into his chair, his chest pumping, his face flush with rage. The judge leaned forward, his gaze frosty. Mr. Brown, this court will not accept outbursts. You are warned. One more, and you will be held in contempt. The silence that ensued was oppressive. Gwen sat motionless, her heart racing, but her expression serene. For the first time in her life, she regarded her father not as the inviolable patriarch, but as a man losing his grip. Her attorney took advantage of the moment. Your Honor, if I might redirect. The judge nodded. Her lawyer faced the jury. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the recordings. You've watched Mr. Brown's reaction. Ask yourselves, is this the behavior of an innocent man, or of someone terrified the truth will come out? The words hit like a hammer. The jury exchanged glances. Some scribbled notes. Others simply stared at Kody with narrowed eyes. Gwen raised her chin. I am not here for vengeance, she murmured, but her words cut across the hall. I am here because I believe in truth. I believe in justice. And I will not allow fear to silence me anymore. Christine quietly wept in the front pew, Janelle stroking her shoulders. Even Meri, who had remained unyielding until this point, dabbed at her eyes. The judge ordered a brief recess. As the gavel fell, pandemonium broke out once more. Reporters sprinted for the doors. Jurors spoke in hushed tones, and the gallery hummed like a beehive. Kody spoke in a harsh but low tone.
If she gets her way, what we had is over. Robin's eyes welled up with tears. She already won, Kody. Can't you see? The truth is out. Across the room, Gwen sat beside her lawyer. Her hands trembled as she finally breathed, the tension of her father's rage weighing upon her chest. But under the fear was a spark of something else. Strength. For so many years she'd felt helpless. Now for the first time she held the power. And as the bailiff rang the court back into order, everyone in the room understood the turning point had finally come. The trial would never again be the same. The courtroom was so still. It seemed as if the air itself were holding its breath. Jurors walked back to their seats, their expressions neutral, their eyes shunning the packed gallery of salivating reporters and relatives. There was nothing but the whisper of papers and the distant buzz of cameras outside, poised to tell the world what happened.
Gwen sat rigidly on the witness stand, her hands clasped together in her lap. She could hear her pulse pounding in her ears. Christine leaned forward from the front row, her hands clasped in silent prayer. Janelle sat beside her, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the jurors. Even Meri, who had been reserved throughout the trial, seemed on the brink of tears. Across the room, Kody sat slumped in his chair, pale, his jaw working convulsively. His attorney murmured something urgently into his ear. But Kody didn't flinch. He sat rigidly forward, his hands clenched on the armrests until his knuckles were white as stone. Robin wiped her eyes with a tissue, her lips shaking, but her eyes darted nervously from Gwen to the jury box. The judge came back, gavel in hand. This court will come to order. Everybody stood as the jurors marched in. Gwen swallowed hard. She scoured their faces for a clue. Sympathy, outrage, anything. But their faces were masks. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes and a calm voice, rose. She grasped a creased piece of paper in her hand. The fate of the world rested on that piece of paper. Has the jury arrived at a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The gallery shifted uncomfortably. Reporters inclined forward, pens at the ready. Cameras snapped like automatic fire. The foreperson handed the sheet of paper to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. He opened it slowly, his eyes moving over the words, before he nodded. In the case of Gwen Brown against Kody Brown, the judge declared, his voice ringing in the strained room. We the jury find. Each head in the room leaned forward. Gwen's breath hitched. Christine's hand went white as she gripped Janelle's hand so tightly. We rule in favor of the plaintiff, Gwen Brown. Gasps ripped the courtroom apart. Reporters leaped from their seats, fighting to break the news first. Christine wept openly, holding her face in relief and heartbreak erupting within. Janelle closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank God." Even Meri let the tears stream down her face, though she turned away promptly to conceal them. Gwen stood still. For an instant, she couldn't move, couldn't draw breath. She had emerged victorious. Despite everything, despite the force of her father's strength and manipulation, she had triumphed. And with that thought, relief surged through her. Then fear. She turned her face to Kody. He wasn't defeated, not yet. Kody rose quickly, his chair squealing on the floor. His face was flushed, his chest straining, and his eyes blazed with something very nearly feral. This is a joke, he bellowed. You're all blind. You think this is justice? You're allowing her to destroy me. The judge's gavel boomed like thunder. Mr. Brown, sit down. You are out of order. But Kody refused to hear. He moved towards her, finger pointing at Gwen, his voice trembling with fury. You'll pay for this, Gwen. You think you've won? You think you've defeated me? You're my daughter, and I'll never forgive you for this betrayal. Security swept over and caught him before he could reach the witness stand. The courtroom exploded in pandemonium. People yelling, reporters running about, Christine screaming. Kody, stop. The voice of the judge rang out over the din. Take him out of that courtroom, now. Two bailiffs snatched Kody's arms and hauled him out towards the door as he kicked and yelled. This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over. His cries rang down the hallway, even after the doors had slammed shut. There was a terrible silence afterwards. Robin slumped into her chair, covering her face with her hands. The other members of the family sat frozen, as if they had just witnessed the empire Kody took decades to build crumble into nothingness in front of them. The judge cleared his throat to calm his tone. The jury has rendered its verdict. Judgment is entered on behalf of the plaintiff. This case is closed. The gavel came down one final time. It was finished. The courtroom cleared in waves. Journalists dashed for cameras lined up outside, their cries high-pitched with excitement. Breaking news: Gwen Brown has won her case against her father, Kody Brown. The jury ruled in her favor after days of explosive testimony and stunning revelations. This is the most public and awful blow yet to the Brown family reputation. Inside, Gwen sat for a long time. Her fingers shook. Her breast heaved with ragged breathing. Christine came to her, still crying, and put arms around Gwen, mouthing in her hair. "You did it. You stood up to him. You told the truth. I am so proud of you." Janelle joined them, her hand on Gwen's shoulder. "You're stronger than all of us ever realized." Even Meri moved forward, her voice subdued but genuine. "It took guts to do what you did. Never let anyone take that away from you." For the first time in years, Gwen did not feel like the forgotten daughter, the outsider, the one perpetually standing in the shadows. She had become the light, fierce, unshakable, unstoppable. Outside, as she walked through the courthouse doors, a blinding flash of cameras, microphones shoved into her face. Journalists yelled over one another. "Gwen, how do you feel after the verdict? What do you say to your father? What are you going to do now that you've won?" Gwen hesitated on the stairs. The world gathered, the family name disintegrating behind her. She drew a breath, voice strong and unshakable. "My message is clear. The truth is important. However long it takes, however difficult, the truth is always important. And no one, not even my dad, can keep it hidden forever." The crowd went wild, shouting and asking questions. But Gwen strode forward, Christine and Janelle on either side of her, the cameras flashing like lightning. Behind her the courthouse stood, the building where she had faced her worst fears and her greatest foe. Before her lay a future still in the making, but for the first time it was hers to create. And as the world replayed her words, her face, her triumph, one thing was certain: Gwen Brown had altered the story forever. The patriarch had toppled, the silence was shattered, and a new chapter had just opened.